He was born on an island, yet destined to rule a continent. Napoleon Bonaparte, the general who rose from obscurity, crowned himself emperor, and left Europe forever changed. His story is one of ambition, brilliance, and downfall, a tale of revolution, empire, and exile. So, as we build this puzzle piece by piece, let's explore the life of the man who shaped the 19th century. Napoleon was born in 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica, just a year after France had taken the island from the Republic of Genoa. Though his family held noble status, they lived modestly. He grew up speaking Italian, not French, and his heart remained Corsican well into his teens. At 9, he was sent to mainland France for school. There, he was an outsider, mocked for his accent and his provincial roots. But what he lacked in charm, he made up for with fierce intelligence and focus. He excelled in mathematics and military theory. At 16, he became a second lieutenant in the French artillery. Poor, isolated, and ambitious, Napoleon developed a lifelong obsession with power, order, and control. Then came the Revolution. In 1789, France erupted. The monarchy crumbled, the nobility scattered, and the old order fell. For a young officer like Napoleon, the chaos offered opportunity. In 1793, he was sent to Toulon, where British forces were supporting royalist rebels. It was there, directing artillery placements with ruthless precision, that he won his first real victory, forcing the British to retreat and reclaiming the city for the Republic. He was just 24 when he was promoted to brigadier general. 2 years later, during unrest in Paris, he ended a royalist uprising with a brutal cannonade. A whiff of grape shot, it was called. Bloody, but effective. Overnight, he became a household name. In 1796, at just 26 years old, Napoleon was given command of the French army of Italy. His troops were hungry and disillusioned, but Napoleon stirred them with words and action. He promised them glory, and he delivered. Over the next year, he defeated Austrian forces in a stunning campaign of speed and strategy. He won battles at Lodi, Arcole, and Rivoli, outmaneuvering larger armies and forcing Austria into peace. He seized northern Italy, redrew the map, and created client republics loyal to France. His tactics revolutionized warfare. He used mobility, deception, and psychological warfare, and he became the hero of the revolution. But he wasn't done. In 1798, Napoleon set sail for Egypt. His goal was grand: to cut off British trade routes and carve out a French empire in the East. He brought not just soldiers, but scholars, artists, and scientists. In Egypt, he defeated the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramids and took Cairo. But then, disaster struck at sea. The British Navy, under Admiral Nelson, destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile. Napoleon was stranded. Even so, the Egyptian expedition left a legacy. His scholars uncovered wonders, including the Rosetta Stone, the key to unlocking ancient Egyptian writing. But with political instability brewing in France, Napoleon abandoned his army and returned home. The timing was perfect. The French government, known as the Directory, was weak and corrupt. In 1799, Napoleon seized power in a coup d'état and made himself first consul. He was now the most powerful man in France. Over the next few years, he reformed the tax system, stabilized the economy, restored public order, and introduced one of his greatest legacies, the Napoleonic Code, a unified legal system that swept away feudal laws and influenced legal systems around the world. In 1804, Napoleon took the final step. In a grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, he crowned himself Emperor of the French. He took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his head, a declaration that he owed his power to himself, not the Church. Europe trembled. Austria, Russia, and Britain formed a new coalition. But in 1805, Napoleon struck first. At the Battle of Austerlitz, he defeated the combined Austro-Russian army in what is often called his greatest victory. He dissolved the Holy Roman Empire and redrew the map of Europe. In 1706, he defeated Prussia at Jena and Auerstedt. In 1707, he crushed the Russians at Friedland and met Tsar Alexander I on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River. There, they signed the Treaty of Tilsit. At that moment, Napoleon stood at the height of his power. His empire now stretched from Spain to Poland. He placed his brothers and generals on the thrones of Europe, Joseph in Spain, Louis in Holland, Jerome in Westphalia. He married an Austrian princess, Marie Louise, and had a son, Napoleon II, the King of Rome. He also modernized France. He built roads, founded schools, created a central bank, and established a merit-based bureaucracy. His Napoleonic Code guaranteed property rights, religious freedom, and civil equality, at least in theory. But not all was well. His ambition made enemies. In 1706, he created the Continental System, an economic blockade designed to choke British trade. But the system hurt European allies as much as Britain. Resistance grew. Then came Spain. In 1708, Napoleon invaded the Iberian Peninsula and placed his brother Joseph on the Spanish throne. But the Spanish people rose in rebellion. Guerrilla warfare, brutal and relentless, tore the French apart. British forces under the Duke of Wellington joined the fight, and the Peninsular War became a quagmire. Meanwhile, Napoleon's empire became harder to control. He censored newspapers, jailed opponents, and ruled with increasing rigidity. He was no longer a revolutionary. He was the emperor. But his greatest mistake came in 1812. That year, Napoleon invaded Russia with over 600,000 men, the largest army Europe had ever seen. His goal was to force Tsar Alexander I to comply with the continental system. But the Russians retreated. They burned their cities, their crops, and their supplies. At Borodino, Napoleon won a costly victory, but the Russians did not surrender. He entered Moscow, only to find it abandoned and burning. With winter approaching and no peace in sight, Napoleon ordered a retreat. It became a nightmare. Snow, starvation, frostbite, and disease devastated the army. Only about 100,000 men made it out. It was the beginning of the end. In 1813, the Allies defeated him at the Battle of Leipzig, the largest battle in European history up to that point. In 1814, Paris fell. Napoleon was forced to abdicate. He was exiled to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. But even that wasn't the end. In March 1815, he escaped Elba and returned to France. Soldiers sent to arrest him joined him instead. The king fled, and Napoleon marched triumphantly into Paris. He ruled again for one final campaign, the 100 Days. But Europe united against him. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon met the Allied armies at Waterloo. It was his final battle. The rain delayed his attack. The British held strong. Late in the day, the Prussians arrived. His Imperial Guard made one last charge and was repelled. His army broke. The dream was over. Napoleon surrendered. This time, he was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic. There, surrounded by British guards, he lived out his final years. He dictated his memoirs, debated history, and paced the rocky shores. In 1821, he died, officially of stomach cancer, though rumors of poisoning lingered. He was 51 years old. His body was returned to France in 1840 and entombed in a grand sarcophagus beneath the golden dome of Les Invalides in Paris. His tomb still draws visitors from around the world. His legacy? Complex. He brought war and destruction to Europe, but also stability, order, and reform. He ended feudalism in much of the continent and inspired nationalist movements from Italy to Latin America. He was both a tyrant and a visionary, a man of the people, and yet a crowned emperor. He shaped modern law, government, and military strategy, but was consumed by ambition. Napoleon Bonaparte, a boy from Corsica who rose to command empires, challenge kings, and change the world. Piece by piece, his story remains one of the most powerful in all of history. When you hear the name Napoleon, you think of empires, battles, and exile. But behind the grand military campaigns and political transformations lies a complex man, ruthless, brilliant, obsessive, and surprisingly human. Let's uncover the lesser-known truths that shaped the legend of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon stood just over 5 feet 6 inches, average height for his time, but British propaganda loved to mock him as a tiny tyrant. Caricatures from London newspapers often exaggerated his size, turning him into a symbol of small man syndrome. In truth, Napoleon's presence filled rooms. His intense stare and calculated silence could unnerve even the most seasoned diplomats. He was meticulous to the point of obsession. He read military reports in bed, annotated books on ancient strategy, and demanded total precision in his maps. His marshals joked that he remembered more about the layout of Germany than they did about their estates. Napoleon also had an incredible memory. He could recall the names, ranks, and family backgrounds of thousands of soldiers. When reviewing his troops, he would call men forward by name, referencing old wounds or promotions they had earned years earlier. That kind of loyalty building made him more than a commander. He was seen as almost prophetic. He rarely slept. Napoleon would often stay up into the early hours planning campaigns, then nap for just a couple of hours before continuing. He claimed sleep was a luxury only the weak enjoyed. His iron discipline became legend, but it came at a cost. He suffered from chronic insomnia, stomach pain, and extreme mood swings. While he was feared on the battlefield, he was oddly awkward in social settings. He disliked dancing, struggled with small talk, and was famously blunt. He once asked an Austrian noblewoman at dinner, "Madame, how many children have you had?" She had to inform him she wasn't married. Another time, when discussing religion, he declared, "The idea of God gives me goosebumps, but I like it." He wasn't good at filters. Despite his awkwardness, he was passionate about art and culture. Napoleon understood the power of symbols. He made sure painters, poets, and sculptors captured his glory, often commissioning heroic depictions that blurred the line between myth and reality. The famous painting of him crossing the Alps? In real life, he rode a mule. In the painting, he charges forward on a white stallion, his cloak billowing like a Roman general. He built the Louvre into one of the greatest museums in the world, filling it with treasures looted during his campaigns. From Egypt to Italy, his armies didn't just conquer cities. They packed crates of statues, manuscripts, and paintings. The Louvre's rise was directly tied to Napoleon's expansion. To him, stealing cultural wealth was part of nation-building. But Napoleon wasn't all grandeur and museums. He also had a secret police force, led by Joseph Fouché, arguably one of the most effective and feared spy networks in Europe. Fouché's agents intercepted letters, blackmailed nobles, and turned rivals against each other. Napoleon allowed it, as long as Fouché delivered results. The result was a web of control so tight that few dared speak against the emperor openly. One of Napoleon's strangest moments came when he tried to create a European-wide currency. He imagined a unified coin system that would rival Britain's pound, one that could be used from Lisbon to Warsaw. The plan never made it past the design phase, but it showed his hunger to control not just land, but commerce, culture, and currency. Then there was his love life. His first wife, Joséphine, was elegant, older, and deeply in debt when they met. Napoleon adored her. He wrote hundreds of passionate, often awkward letters. In one, he famously wrote, "I will return in 5 days. don't bathe. Yet she was often unfaithful, and when she failed to produce an heir, Napoleon divorced her for political reasons. He later married Marie Louise of Austria, niece of Marie Antoinette, uniting France and its old enemy. They had one son, Napoleon II, whom he dubbed the King of Rome. But the child would never rule. After Waterloo, Napoleon's dream of a dynasty crumbled. His downfall wasn't just about battles, it was about scale. He tried to control too much, too quickly. He underestimated resistance, especially from the Spanish, the Russians, and the British. His ambitions outgrew his resources, and his allies became his enemies. When he was exiled to St. Helena, he brought with him a few loyal attendants and a personal library of over 1,200 books. Even in captivity, he dictated memoirs, rewrote his past, and argued that history would vindicate him. "What is history?" he said, "but a fable agreed upon." He died in 1821, likely of stomach cancer, though conspiracy theories still swirl around arsenic poisoning. Even his death became a myth. And his legacy? In France, Napoleon is still both celebrated and controversial. Some see him as a military genius and modernizer. Others see a dictator who trampled liberty in pursuit of glory. What's undeniable is his impact. He reshaped Europe, redefined leadership, and built one of the most enduring legends in world history, not just on the battlefield, but through culture, law, and myth. Napoleon Bonaparte, emperor, strategist, dreamer, exile, and behind it all, a man who believed he was destined to bend the world to his will.